Hey there, welcome to another episode of Board Gems, my weekly series in which I highlight an older game. It's often not crazy old, but anyway, it's one that people aren't talking about anymore. Hobbyists are always call to the new, always going to try out the new games. Here's an old game that you shouldn't forget about. It's Carolus Magnus. This one here. It was designed by Leo Colovini and was published in Germany by Winning Moves. This one is the German edition, in fact. And otherwise, I think internationally or in different languages, like English and Italian, it was published by Venice Connections, which was his company, or he was one of the principals of it. So it's for 2 to 4 players, ages, good question. It says ages 12 and up. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I would say probably 10 and up, but it is a pretty thinky game. And very, what we would say is dry. It's a dry game. So it's not that it's complicated, it's just that kids may not appreciate it. And it takes 30 to 45 minutes to play, which is pretty accurate. This was nominated for Game of the Year in, I want to say the year 2000. In fact, I think it has a little icon on it here. Oh yeah, nominated for Spiel des Jahres. Yeah, 2000. I'm going to show you how it plays first. Then afterwards we'll talk about why it's a gem. To set up the game, place the 15 board segments in a circle and take the Emperor pawn, that's this one here, and put it on any board to start. Doesn't matter. Dump all the cubes in the middle of the table, or if you're like me, you got one of these things. There's 5 colors. You're going to get 3 of each color, so 15 cubes total. You're going to mix them up and randomly place 1 on each of the territories. You're going to have these 5 markers, which can be taken by the players to indicate that they control that color. Place it in the middle for now, along with these dice. The dice show the 5 colors, these 5 colors, and also a crown, which is a wild symbol. Each player is going to get 1 court, that's this board here, and they're going to place it in front of them with the castle pointing toward them, and leave lots of room on this side. Maybe I'll put it over here. Have lots of room on this side to place cubes. Players are going to be collecting cubes of the different colors on this side. And each player is going to get a set of 5 discs numbered 1 to 5. Now in a 2-player game, 1 player gets black and 1 player gets white. In a 3-player game, there's also a set of 5 grays, which will be given to the 3rd player. The 4-player game is a partnership game. On each team, each player is going to get 1 set of markers of the team's color. So there's actually a second set, which you can see here. And you can see how they're slightly different. I'm missing one. Oh, here. You can see they're slightly different in that one of them has this little crescent kind of shadow on it. So teammates are going to have the same color tokens. 1 team will be black, 1 team will be white. And each team will get a set of towers. If you're playing with 2 teams, so in a 2 or 4-player game, you're going to play with 10 castles per side, 10 white, 10 black. In a 3-player game, there's going to be a 3rd team gray, and each team is going to get 8 towers. And finally, each player is going to start with a number of cubes in their reserve. And in order to do that, they're going to roll the dice a number of times. In a 2 or 4-player game, each player is going to roll the dice. You're going to roll 7 dice, and those are the colors you're going to get. In a 3-player game, you're actually going to roll 9 dice. And they take those and they put them in front of them within visibility of all players. It's important that all players get to see what's in each other's reserve, but make sure you don't yet put them on this side. That'll happen over the course of the game. The goal of the game is for each player or team to get all their towers on the board. The first player or team to do that wins the game. These towers are going to be placed on the board as this emperor moves around the board. And wherever the emperor lands, you're going to have a look at that territory and determine which player or team has the most influence or power in that territory. If there's no tower already in there, then the player with the most influence or power will be able to put a tower in there. And if there's already a tower in there, then if it changes, that tower can be kicked out, returned back to that player or team, and then a new tower comes in. These cubes on these territories will help to determine who will control the territory when the emperor lands on it. These cubes are not per se controlled by any one player just automatically. It's not like a typical area majority game in which one player is green, one player is red. No, in this game, the colors themselves can change hands. And that's where these markers come in. Whoever has this marker controls all the green cubes, and the green cubes work for that player or that player's team. And in order to gain control of these, you'll be adding cubes to your court. There's room to add cubes next to each of the 5 colors. And as soon as one player has more of a color than any other single player, they take this marker from wherever it is. If it's possessed by another player, they take it from them. And so it's a very dynamic game because the colors themselves are changing hands. I have this set up for a 2-player game, but the general flow works exactly the same for 2, 3, or 4 players. So each player has their 5 discs that they use. Now the discs numbers determine 2 things. They determine how far that player wants to move the emperor, but also determines the turn order, the lower numbers going before the higher numbers. So in the first round, determine a start player randomly, and for that first round you can just play clockwise. But the start player is going to pick one of the 5 discs that they have in front of them. And by convention, they're going to take that disc and just put it inside the circle, close to them. And that's that's the number that they're using this round. Now, the other players, again, in the first round will probably be clockwise order, will play a disc as well. They have to play a different number unless they have no other choice. If they have no other choice, then they play the same number because they have to, but then the player who played the number first will be going first. So the other player may play something else, for example, may play like this, something like that. After every player has put down a disc, then we go in order from lowest to highest. So starting with white, it'll be white's turn first, and white does 3 things. You do 3 things on your turn. You play cubes from your personal supply, and you can play them either to your court or directly onto the provinces. Then you move the emperor up to a number of spaces equal to your disc, and then you replenish. So you'll have the same number at the end of your turn that you did at the start. In a 2 or 4 player game, you're going to play 3 cubes. In a 3-player game, you're going to play 4. And for each cube, you're going to choose where it goes. Early in the game, you'll generally be putting cubes in your court. So for example, this is a 2-player game where we'll be playing 3 cubes. White may do something like this. And because nobody has these colors in their court yet, they are going to get both of these and just put them on their court like this. Now, green and red cubes on the provinces, on the territories, help this player, help White's team. But instead of playing cubes onto the court, they can instead put cubes directly onto the provinces. And you'll usually do that more mid to late in the game to kind of overcome other players' majorities. Because right now, whoever controls green controls this province. But if it looked like this, and red was controlled by a different player, red would control that province. You'll see how it works in a second. So anyway, after you play your 3 cubes, and you can mix them up, you can put 1 cube here and 2 cubes here, and the 2 cubes you put on the provinces can be in the same province or different provinces. There's no limitation, you can put them anywhere you want. Then you move the emperor up to that many spaces, a space being 1 territory. So this player could move it 1 space or 2 spaces. Supposing white moved it 2 spaces, now that the emperor is here, we don't look at the ones that it skipped over. We only look at the one the emperor ultimately landed on. And then you count the number of cubes on there and who controls which colors. So right now there's only 1 cube, green. Which player controls green? It's this player, or this team. It's white's team. So the white team gets to take 1 white tower and put it on the territory, just like that. Now, this does a couple things. For one thing, you're closer to victory, because once a team gets rid of all their towers, they win. But it also, if you will, adds to the defense of that territory. So right now, green is adding 1 power or influence, anyway, 1 value to this territory for white's benefit, because white controls this green marker, but later on a different team could control green. But this also counts as 1, but always for white. So right now, white has 2 power in this territory. If later on another team gets control of the green marker, and later on the emperor comes back here, then we're going to look at it again and say, well, white has 1, and let's say black has the green marker, so black controls green, black has 1, it's a tie. What happens in a tie? Nothing. There's no change. So white would continue to control it. But of course, another team may add more cubes to this territory to kind of, so if for example, black controls blue, then he may also want to put blue on here before the emperor lands on it. And then we would evaluate. So white has 1 point, but let's suppose black controls both blue and green. So now black has 2 to white's 1. In this case, the tower gets kicked out. This white tower is returned back to the white team and is replaced with a black one. So after the emperor moves, then this player replenishes. So in this case, because it's a 2-player game, they played up to 3 cubes, they would roll 3 dice and add that many cubes to their personal supply. So a blue and a red, and 1 color of their choice. And now it's the next player's turn, which is only 1 other player, and that's 5. So black is able to move this emperor up to 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But of course, first, again, this player is able to put cubes onto their board. So for example, they may look and see the white team has 2 blues, so they're going to put 2 blues here first, like so. Because later on, even if white adds 2 blue cubes to here, a tie is not enough to take control of that marker. The player has to get more cubes in their court than any other single player. A tie is not going to do it. So something like this, for example. So in this way, the black team has control of blue and pink. Now you can move this up to 5 spaces. So black may want to go here or to go here, something like this. And again, we'd evaluate it. There's only 1 point of influence here and it's controlled by the black team, so black gets to put a tower on here. And that's 1 round. Then when we start the next round, we always start with the with the player who played the lowest number. And this number is not available anymore for that player. They only have these 4 that they can choose from. They are not able to choose the 2 anymore. But after 5 rounds, they'll get all their discs back and then they can play whichever one they want. So they could play another one and they might play a 3, for example. And by convention, you'll just kind of overlap it, so players can always see what numbers have already been played. And again, black can do something like this. A black may play a 1. So now, black would go first. So now, on their turn, again, they would place 3 cubes, or 4 in a 3-player game. They know the emperor is going to go here because they played a 1. It's definitely going to land on this space. They could also add cubes onto the board, of course, but again, right now they don't have to. They're just going to start. They're going to do this, which would, at least for now, give them yellow, although they can see the other player. The other player has more yellows. They can take it away. 1, 2, 3, something like this. Just kind of lock it in. And then the emperor moves 1 space. Now we look and see 1 point, pink. Who controls pink? The black team does. So we add a black tower. Now, here is one of the key parts of the game. Whenever you have 2 territories next to each other that share the same color tower, they merge. The same team controls this province and this province, so they merge them together. Something like that. And now this is considered 1 province, 1 territory. It has 2 towers in it and 2 cubes. So this is more difficult now for the other teams to be able to take control because black has 2 points of control in addition to the cubes. And as the emperor moves later, they treat this province like 1 step. This would never ever separate for the rest of the game. The game can end when there's only 4 territories left, but otherwise the game will end when 1 player runs out of their towers. And so that's a key part of the game. Once you're able to consolidate territories into larger territories, it becomes easier to defend them from takeovers. And takeovers happen when you add cubes not to your courts, but then onto the territories. If later on black wants to come over here, let's say in a later round, black ends up landing on, is here, and he's able to get the emperor onto this space, he could actually take, for example, as part of his play, he's playing 3 cubes, he can take some of them and put them on the territory. So something like this. Then when the emperor lands on it, you would look and see, well, white has 2 points of control, the green and also this white tower, but the black team has 3. So now this territory is controlled by black, and this tower would come off and the black tower would come on. And if there was already a black tower here, then it would merge. And you can have very large territories combined. So it's a very dynamic, flowing game. The 2, 3, and 4 player games are all basically the same. The main difference in the 4-player game is that it's a partnership game. Each player is on a team, black or white, but they fight for these individually. So when you're looking at a province and seeing which team has the most control, then you're looking at each individual player's court. You don't add up the cubes in the teams, in the player's court for 1 team. You just look at each player. So if one of the 2 players on the team has the yellow marker, then yellow works for that team. So you're going to keep playing like that, rounds, and again, when all 5 markers are out, then you're going to take them back. And then the first team to get rid of all their towers wins the game. Or if all these provinces, so many of these merge that in the end there's only 4 territories on the board, then you stop the game early, and then whoever has the most towers on the board wins. That's it. You're ready to play Carolus Magnus. I have a little story to tell. One time I was sitting down to play Carolus Magnus at a local game session, and we had 3 of us and we were getting ready to sit down, and a 4th person, I think they were new to the group, came in and said, "Hey, can I join you?" And we're like, well, sure, of course, right? Better than you standing there, right? Come join us for a game. And then there was a fifth person who was observing this, who actually came and tried to stop us from playing. Don't stop! Play something else! Don't play Carolus Magnus! Like, what? Because the generally accepted truth is that Carolus Magnus is best at 3 players. Some people extend that to mean it is only good with 3 players. They are wrong. It is great with all player counts, but the game feels quite differently with 2, 3, and 4. 2 and 4 actually feel quite similar, but you have that extra consideration. Of course, you have a partner, you see which cubes, which colors they're strong in, and it's an extra thing to think about, right? If you're getting cubes of a color that you're not using, but your opponent is strong, your partner rather, is strong in, then you may consider putting those cubes on the board to help your team's position. And it's a really interesting way to play. 2-player and 3-player, rule-wise, is very, very similar, but 3 players is the thinkier, more challenging game because you have an extra player to think about. All the information is shared by everybody. Everybody can see the game state, the exact same game state, and it's possible to puzzle it out a bit. No, you can't puzzle it out too much because, of course, the dice rolls, but you don't know what cubes you're getting later. But you do have that kind of a little bit of look ahead. You got a lot of planning. You can see the game state and you can see everything that you need to do. When you add a 3rd player to the mix, there's more to think about. So the rules actually suggest for your first game, consider playing just 2-player. And then once you kind of get a feel for it and you're comfortable with the game, then try it with 3. And 3 is brilliant. It is one of the best games for 3 players, in my opinion. It's really great, but it's really, really thinky and really challenging. And one of the things, and there's been a few games in this video series that I have covered that are like this, which are interesting combinations of a nice thinky experience where the player who looks ahead and plans their move out a little bit better will do better in the game. But it's not chess, right? You're not expected, a player, who's looking ahead 3 turns is going to lose to a player who's looking ahead 4 turns. You can't look ahead that far in a game of Carolus Magnus because of the random element, because of the dice rolls. So you don't know what cubes you're getting later. You may be strong in certain colors now, but the cubes you get later may not support that. That mix might turn off a few people. This kind of middle ground is lost, where you have games that are thinky, games in which you can plan ahead a bit, and the player who plans ahead is going to do better, but there's something which limits that. So I can think very hard, but there's no point in thinking more than this because there's some element which is unpredictable. So in the case of Carolus Magnus, it's a dice roll. And I know dice, right? Rolling dice to a lot of gamers probably feels like, oh my god, that's too random. It's just, this randomized element that keeps you from looking too far ahead. So it makes it a puzzle, a tactical puzzle for now. And then your next turn comes around, it's going to be a little bit different. It's like at the end of your turn, you're getting new cubes. Maybe they're not what you were hoping for. But you have until your next turn to think about how you're going to deal with this. This type of game doesn't really come out anymore. It's short enough that it could almost be a filler, but it's a thinky filler. What some in the hobby used to call a super filler, which is games that are not very long. They're longer than a filler, so 30, 45 minutes. But they're really interesting, and they're not like, oh, who cares, we're just having some fun and soon the game's over and we'll forget about it. No, there's meat to chew on in this game. It's and that super filler, what we used to call it, isn't really popular much anymore. I think if you're into the hobby, you should try some of these older games. That's one of the reasons I do this video series. I want people to try these older games and judge for themselves whether they like it or not. Don't just go by the hobby hive mind, and don't focus only on the new stuff, right? Because they don't really make games like this anymore, you might find that this type of game, the Carolus Magnus type of game, is exactly your cup of tea. Because they don't really make that style of game anymore, you wouldn't know it. because you're only looking at the newer games, like all hobbyists do, and I understand that completely. But just keep in mind that as time progresses and new games come out, game styles change. And there are older styles which they don't really make many games of anymore. And if you're only looking at the new games, you're going to miss out on some of those. But I will say this game right here, for the type of game it is brilliant. Okay? And it is probably one of the best 3-player games that you can get. But don't let that put you off. Try it 2-player, try it 4-player. They're all good in their own way and all different feeling games. It's nice when you have a game that basically has the same rules for 2, 3, and 4 players, but each player count, the game feels very different. And so I'm playing this with 3-player and it's great, and later on I play it with 4 and it's like, oh, this is like the same game, but now I have to totally think about something different. It's a different experience. If you can get past kind of the dry theme of kind of the beige tiles and the colored cubes, and if you want a game that rewards thoughtful play, but does not reward look ahead, in fact it prevents look ahead, I think this is a cracking game. This is a great game, and it is my board gem of the week. Sometimes it can be hard to talk about the flaws of something that you happen to like quite a bit. So this section is called Rating Rebuttal. The idea is I brought up Board Game Geek on a laptop here, and I brought up all the ratings that are 4 out of 10 and have comments. I have not read these in advance. I'm going to give my take on them. I'm not going to attribute them. It's not about being personal here. I'm just going to, these are some thoughts from some people who really didn't like the game. And I'll reply to their opinions and I'll share whether I think they're fair criticisms or not. Not the great 3-player solution that we hoped it would be. Too easy to leave one player with an insoluble dilemma, and there are games that scratch the 3-player itch much more effectively. Carolus and Goa springing readily to mind. I would say, though, that Carolus and Goa are much longer games than Carolus Magnus, so it's not as if it scratches the same itch at all. And those games are not just longer, they're bigger. They got more moving pieces, literally and figuratively. So Carolus Magnus isn't in the same genre that they are. Regardless of the player number, this is an almighty head-herder of a game, which will either attract a small band of devotees or put people off gaming for good. Yeah, I guess I'm in the small band of devotees. The random element of the dice is a real spoiler, though. And that's not a surprising criticism. I feel like in this hobby, games can be light and fluffy and airy, and people don't take them too seriously, or they're like super brain burny, but also combined with complexity and with randomness minimized. And the in-between is kind of lost. You have games, and there's been a few games on the channel that I've covered that are like this, games that are thinky, but have a strong random element. And it's very easy for somebody to come up and say, well, this is a really thinky strategic or game, but the luck is too big. It's like, well, as always the case is with these games, the luck means you can't just come up with a strategy at the beginning of the game and see it through. You have to be on your toes. You have to be kind of have a dynamic plan. You are working toward one thing, but then the dice roll is not helping you do that thing, so you have to switch gears. And some games it's very, very hard to switch gears, but I wouldn't say Carolus Magnus is one of those games. You have to be flexible, and it is very possible to do these clever moves, even when the cubes aren't falling your way, or the dice rolls aren't falling your way, you can do some fun things. Like in the 4-player game, for example. Let's say your partner is collecting a lot of yellow. Well, and so they're strong in yellow, that's fine. And you're rolling dice and you're getting yellow. Well, you don't need the yellow. You're not going to try to compete with your partner, right? Your partner's got yellow locked up. So what do you use yellow for? Well, you're not going to put them in your court. You can put the yellow on the board. And then that helps your partner and helps your team, right? So just be flexible, that's all I say. Not a bad little medium game, some intricacies. However, as the game progresses and the islands merge, there can be large swings with games turning on a dime. Yeah, but I'd call that a good quality, not a bad quality. You don't want a game that just kind of plods forward and you kind of can see the end 3 or 4 moves ahead, right? You want a game that's, again, is dynamic. You're changing your plans and you think you had the game locked up, but then somebody makes this really cool move and suddenly the whole board is changed. That's a good thing. You should want that in a game. You want those sorts of big dynamic plays, and Carolus Magnus provides it. The game offers a lot of technical decisions on how to achieve the majority in the game areas, that is, to play influence either on the board or into the court. However, I am afraid that in the long run, the only valid strategy is to concentrate on increasing your influence in the court, because that way you'll increase your power on the board as well, while playing onto the board does not change how things are in the court. Due to the one seemingly dominant strategy and the heavy emphasis on tactical decisions, Carolus Magnus feels a bit one-dimensional. Not a bad game, only uninspiring. One-dimensional. I mean, in a way, it's literally one-dimensional because the emperor always moves clockwise in a circle. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about what that means in terms of, or what he means in terms of there being one valid strategy. Because you have the option of playing cubes to your court or playing cubes onto the board. And he's saying that, both are good strategies, but on the playing to the court is much, much stronger than playing to the board. So why would you do that? Well, especially you'll do it if it's late in the game and you're kind of falling behind, that placing cubes onto the board changes the game state temporarily. Placing cubes to the court is much better. And in the first half of the game, you'll almost exclusively be doing that. Maybe the first third of the game. But then as it progresses and you're thinking about how to combine provinces to make them stronger, you will definitely need to be adding cubes to the board. So it's not a one or the other. It's not like, we're playing a 2-player game and I'm playing cubes to the court and you're just playing cubes onto the board. Yeah, that's a bad strategy for you and I'm probably going to win. But both players will have to do both. So I don't see it as a downside. My rating is probably too generous. I can see the cleverness of the design in some aspects, but other aspects just feel way too random and straight up boring. This is an example of one of the older Euro games that is not a lot of rules and points, done wrong. It felt uninspired, boring theme, visually horrible to behold, too random, dice rolls, arg. Yeah, that's a matter of personal taste. I mean, it doesn't really have a theme. So the look can be a little bit drab, I guess, with the tiles, the provincial or territorial tiles being kind of beige, and just colored cubes. Game stands out, easy to read the game state. You don't have to put so much focus on the theme. But again, another complaint is the dice make it too random. Almost all of Colovini's games are quite frankly boring, and on top of that, this one even had too much luck. If you don't roll enough of a certain color to overtake that color, it's hard to manipulate anything. That is, if you roll 1 or 2 of each color and almost no wilds, you're unlikely to win. Bad game. This person feels very strongly about this. Leo Colovini's game designs are of a particular type, and you either like them or you don't. Leo Colovini game designs tend to be polished and smoothed out, so there's very, very few rough edges. And so as a game, it can, in the best case scenario, the game just kind of smoothly just slides along, and emergent fun happens with the players interacting, and the rules just melt away. But in some games, I find that you actually don't want a super balanced game. You want a little bit of imbalance, not between the players. You don't want it to be unfair, but, compare getting 2 points versus 3 points, like in Tokaido. That's not very exciting. Whereas getting 6 points versus 2 points, that is exciting. That's a bigger thing, or 10 points versus 2. So Leo Colovini games tend to be balanced and really kind of condensed to be kind of the most pure version that the game could possibly be. And I think a lot of hobbyists would like to have more stuff added to it, like a hand of cards and stuff like that, special powers. No, thank you. But I can understand some people finding Colovini's designs to be dry. Carolus Magnus and Cartagena are two of his more famous games. And they're simple rules, and they're really polished, and they're great. About the comment, if you don't roll enough of a certain color to overtake that color, it's hard to manipulate anything. Yeah, but keep in mind also the game is short, right? So yeah, if you kind of try to lock into one color, and then later in the game you're not getting that color, another player is, maybe they can overtake you, but you're getting another color, you're not running out of cubes, you're always getting cubes. And you can complain about the luck, like, oh, I'm not getting the cubes that I want, but work with the cubes you're getting, right? Just my take. It's been many years since playing this, and with all the good games to come out since, I doubt I will ever play it again. Even looking at the pictures, it seems like a rather forgettable game. Okay, don't forget about it. That's why I'm doing this game. Don't forget about it. Everyone was too quiet, playing, trying to work out what the optimal move was, not something I enjoy. I don't want to play again. Yeah, it's a thinky experience, and in general, I don't like games either in which players are just hunkered over the table and they're just concentrating really hard. I don't find Carolus Magnus to be that kind of game. Especially if this player should try the partnership game. And if you want to play casually, of course, don't worry about communication, chat it up with your partner. And because there's no hidden information in the game. Obviously, there's information that you don't know what's going to happen later with the dice rolls, but it's not like a player has a hand of cards and they're keeping them secret. It's like, no, table talk is completely fine in this game. So I would recommend this user give it another try. But they said they don't want to play again, so... I played it again with 3, and I'm not sure I like the second part of the game in which the flow of the game grinds to a halt. Okay, I didn't see what this player sees in the game about the flow grinding to a halt. I mean, the game's going to slow down because you're trying to think, how am I going to be able to do what I need to do with the cubes I have available? Kind of fun at first, but in the end there was too much luck in the dice rolling, and that pretty much decided the game. A lot of people are saying this. I would just say it's very possible, because this user says they played twice. I think it's possible if you just play it not very much, you just play it once or twice, and you just you initially just get a feel early in the game, like how you think you should play the game, and you are not flexible in working with what you get, then yeah, you're gonna, I'm committed to blue and pink. I need to keep blue and pink, and then I'm going to win. And I roll, and I'm not getting blue and pink. Well, it's the dice's fault. And it's like, well, don't be flexible. I know you're focused on blue and pink for now, but if later on you're getting lots of green, maybe you should switch gears. This game would be so much better if the mechanism to get the cubes wasn't a random dice fest. You've been warned. Played recently again after a many-year hiatus. The span of time had tricked me into thinking this was more fun than it really is, which is too bad, because it looks fantastic. Yeah, this person likes the look of Carolus Magnus. Yeah, fun is... depends what you find fun. Fun is the magic thing, right? Some games have it, some games don't. What games have the fun and which don't? And that's going to be different for different people. I find the kind of puzzling out on how to consolidate the board and how to do it with the cubes that you're getting, I do find that kind of puzzle fun. But it's not like, woo, kind of fun. Nobody's going to cheer in a game of Carolus Magnus. I'm not that averse to luck and dice in general, but I found the abstract gameplay at odds with the high luck factor in this game. Now that I know many more games, I would play again to see if my opinion on the game is still valid, but I'm not desperate to. Yeah, that's an interesting take, and it's kind of reflective of what some other people are saying. Because again, it's Carolus Magnus is combining the what is basically an abstract, thinky game, but there's that random element of which cubes you're going to get later, and that seems to turn off a lot of people. A sudden win game. You play for an hour or so, and the lead is alternating, and then one of the players wins suddenly. A disappointment. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of games that have that potential, especially games that don't have points per se, right? They're like race games. You're trying to be the first player to get rid of all your towers. And like I said earlier, Carolus Magnus is you're actually able to do these kind of big plays where it's like, I do this, and then I do that, and now this one, which you thought was safe, is actually now mine, and now that merges like 4 different territories together. You can do kind of big moves like that. I don't consider that a downside. So there's my rating rebuttal for Carolus Magnus. So keep my positive comments in mind, but temper them with some of the criticisms. It's a really nice abstract thinky game, but it does have a very strong random element. When you're building out your plan, you're building your strategy, you have to stay flexible. You have to keep in mind that the cubes you get later might not support what you're initially trying to do. And so you have to figure out a way to switch gears. And all that in a 30, 45 minute game. It really can be that short. It's still a great game today. I understand there's going to be a new version coming out from, I think, Cranio Creations, which makes sense. That's an Italian company, too. Wondering what they do with it, hoping the rules don't change too much. But based on what I'm reading here, to make it more appealing to a modern audience, maybe they will have to make a little bit of changes, change the dice into something else. I like it fine just the way it is. Thanks for watching. Remember, old games like Carolus Magnus don't stop being good just because new games come out. Take care.